So being the youngest of five, we have a 10-year, span between my eldest sister, Brittany, who's a co-founder of Her Story, and me. And so it goes girl, boy, girl. And so I think I am definitely was the go with the flow, like thrown in the car, left at home sometimes. My siblings would call me Matilda. They're like, Tinsley knew how to make pancakes at the age of 2 because we were going to soccer practice and mom was all over the place dropping everyone off. And I was like, no, it's fine. I'll make the banana pancakes. Like, we're good to go. So I was always very self-sufficient.
Yeah.
And I was always kind of a little entrepreneur. Like I was always coming up with little ways to like make extra cash from whether it was my siblings or my dad. I would set up lemonade stands in our house for my siblings to pay me to make them lemonade.
Finest. Yeah.
So,
I got this from the fridge, but don't tell anyone else.
Literally.
And then you followed, or I don't like the word followed, but you followed their lead to Dallas and went to school at SMU.
Yes.
Which is where you pursued that entrepreneurial spirit inside of you. Looking back at your younger self, you kind of just alluded to, are there a few things that looking back on now you noticed about yourself that led you down the path of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think I always had really amazing women in my life. And then I always had leaders. My dad was an entrepreneur since he was young. And so I think looking at him, he always was like, no star is too far out of your reach. You can always do it. You can always create it. And then I saw my sister Brittany when I was the age of 9. She was 19 going to Uganda, starting a nonprofit on her own, just traveling there with friends. And so I think I've always seen really, amazing, inspiring people do things that felt like it couldn't have been attainable, and then going to SMU, which you guys probably know, but there's something weird in the water at SMU where like all of these women are starting these incredible businesses, whether it be, Whitney Wolf with Bumble or Amber Vance Box with Rewards I'll Like to Know It, or my sister Brittany with a cola. There's just so many people who've done such incredible things at such a young age in college. And so I think that really put a fire in my belly that made me believe that, I could do more than the typical probably 18-year-old would think they'd be able to achieve.
Having a mentor or leader has been something that's completely transformed my life, and there's so much impact that you can learn. I'm going to start with your job with Bumble. What's one thing that working for that CEO taught you about entrepreneurship as a whole?
I mean, in the startup journey, you're just kind of thrown in with the wolves, right? And I think what was so fun with Bumble is I never knew what Bumble was going to be when, Whitney and Alex Williamson popped into Kappa when I'm 18 saying, hey, we need an intern to help us with X, Y, and Z. We're starting a dating app. And dating apps weren't even a thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So for me, I was like, oh, this is a really cool opportunity to learn what a startup looks like, having seen what my sister Brittany had done with her company, Acola. And so I dove into this social media internship, having no idea, what a startup looks like. And at the time, it was just Whitney, Alex, and then 2 other interns they had. So I think being able to have the opportunity to actually see what you can do in a company so quickly, and then also just learning that like no company has it together in the beginning. It's kind of a free-for-all, and what really drives a company is the backbone of the founder in the beginning. And I think that's what Whitney had. She had a story and a reason and a passion for what she was doing. So the biggest thing I learned with Bumble is just, wow, if you have an idea and you believe in it, you can make anything happen.
How do you believe there's a lot of people with ideas, but what do you feel she did differently with her idea to execute the way she did with Bumble?
I think when she started Bumble, she didn't strategically make the company. I think for her, when she started Bumble, it was because there were situations that happened to her in her past that she was not okay with. And she was going to make a difference, and she was going to create a solution to that problem. And I think Bumble came about trying to say, this isn't okay, and I'm standing for something more. And I think that's why it's turned into what it has today. So I do think when people have, a fire under their belly and they say, I'm not going to stick with the status quo. I'm not taking this as an, okay, I'm going to be treated this way and I'll swallow my pride, but instead saying, no, I'm going to make a difference. And I don't want anyone else to ever deal with what I dealt with. That's when you say, like, wow, this founder's done something like unbelievable. And I think Whitney came into the scene and was like, I'm making a difference. And that's what made her really successful.
Is there one quality or trait or piece of advice that you took away from her that you've carried throughout your entire journey?
So I was more underneath Alex Williamson, who was kind of her right-hand woman
Okay.
at the time. And I think what I learned from her and kind of seeing the journey of Bumble is you can grow so much faster with a team. And I think for what they did, they were able to go into SMU campus, right? And really believe in young leaders that would be able to build out this campus representative structure that made Bumble grow so quickly and went into Alabama and all of these other schools, Vanderbilt. And so I think the biggest learning experience for me was understanding, young talent can sometimes be the best talent.
Yeah.
And if you get a group of women together and they build together, that's where you see, the most success and the most impact.
Being a young female in that space at such a young age is an opportunity. It's definitely a blessing. What was the biggest challenge that you faced being so young and probably a little bit naive in that startup, fast-paced world?
I think for me, the biggest learning experience that I was able to see and grow from between, Bumble and Acola and Reward Style is really seeing what it means to be a leader and being able to, own your position as like a founder and what it means to be able to say, I don't know everything that I'm going into right now, but I want to learn together with everyone behind me. So not necessarily thinking you're the smartest person in the room, but instead really surrounding yourself with people who are smarter than you, more experienced than you, and being able to grow from that. And I think being in startup, you're able to get your hands in so many different buckets that by the time your team grows to, 5, 10, 15 people, you realize, wow, these are my strengths, but where my weaknesses are, that's where I need to bring in other people who know what they're doing and can really help me grow and transform, my original concept.
Looking back as we kind of dive into your whole journey to support her story, looking back on all of your experiences, are there a few things that you either took away or a few synchronicities, if you will, that kind of led you down your path of her story?
There are so many. So many, obviously, things that happened. I think what's really interesting with her story is it wasn't strategic. It wasn't planned. I wasn't, planning on creating this concept where women could come behind each other and be able to cross-promote one another and grow. But it happened based on all of the different internships and life experiences I had kind of brought me there. And I think it's funny looking back now, every single internship I took, a lot of different classes, conversations I had with professors at SMU, it all gave me traits to allow me to create a platform like her story. And it took so many different, speaking of mentors, mentors to really teach me lessons throughout my journey that led me to her story. And that took, leaving Pear and growing from that during COVID and understanding events and technology. And it took me working at Reward Style and understanding what influencer marketing means and why Amber kind of created that. And it took me Bumble and looking at what, Whitney did, saying, I'm going to make a change and women should be able to make the first move. And that was really the first wave of, okay, women have control, right? Women can own the narrative, own their own narrative. And then looking at my sister Brittany with Acola, understanding what, social business, social impact meant
Mhm.
and the difference that you can make in communities, but more so the difference communities can make in you.
You mentioned this to me that her story all started at the root.
hmm
What does that mean for the audience? It's an interesting way to phrase it.
So back in 2020, I was gung ho into my company Pair. And, I was the face of Pair. I was so excited. It was all about experiential events and being able to bring people together. I think the one thing that you'll hear reiterated over and over again is community and bringing people
Mhm.
together and networking. Like that's always been something that's a part of who I am and what I've done. And so when we were building out the software, I think, something that was really difficult when COVID hit was all of the sudden it was all about events and bringing people together IRL in person. And then all of a sudden COVID happens and we think it'll be a week, 2 weeks, and this is happening. And then before we know it, right, the whole world shuts
Yeah.
down. And events, we can't not only have events are illegal. So
Yeah.
like we can't even like bring people together if we wanted to. And so we obviously pivoted to virtual experiences. And I think during that time, I got to look at all of these different brands we had worked with and women I'd worked with in the past and seeing the fact that they had put so much time and energy into these companies and those that weren't able to move to direct to consumer as quickly as possible or didn't have those platforms, they were dying.
Yeah.
And, wholesale and retail, they were dying. So they couldn't take care of these smaller businesses. The ones they were going to take care of are obviously the ones that were their money makers. And so looking at, how her story started, it was a conversation. My sister came to me and she had started at Cola, as I mentioned, when she was 19 and was working with 250 women in Uganda who not only in Uganda, they're dealing with COVID, right?
Mhm.
And you're shut off from the rest of the world and their government. But on top of that, she didn't know if Acola was going to make it like to the
Yeah.
next month after spending over 15 years, doing what she was doing. And a lot of that had to do with they really based their survival on wholesale partnerships and retail partnerships. And so we started seeing this reoccurring conversation with people of just like, oh my God, what do I do? Where do I go?
Yeah.
How do I, convert? And with those conversations, we were able to support her story within 2 weeks with our friend Whitney, who started Miracle Milk Cookies, another community-based, right, company
Yeah.
for moms. And through conversations, we were like, let's just throw together a subscription box and we're going to get 25 brands on board from Texas and New York and we'll support them and sell through their inventory. And then we can cross promote each other and we'll be able to grow our audiences organically because none of us can afford marketing, right? Like, great idea, passion project will work. And before we know it, 4 weeks after having initial conversations about this, we are hand delivering like supporter story luxury subscription box door to door in Dallas. And we had all of the
At your service.
packaging, like at white glove, truly. And if you asked me 5 weeks ago, I will not be delivering,
Yeah.
boxes to people's doors, but it just happened that way.
Mhm.
And then after, the subscription box kind of took off during Mother's Day, this question, popped in all of our heads where Whitney is the CEO of Miracle Milk Cookies, right? Brittany is the CEO of Acola. I was the CRO of Pear. Who's going to grow this company? We don't have
Yeah.
time. This was supposed to be a passion project. And so when I say it started from the root, like truly um, there was no idea of like a business or a business structure. And then all of a sudden the question came, but these businesses need to be supported and these
Mhm.
brands want to come up behind each other and share each other's stories and they want to share their mission and their products. And so I think that, initial moment of saying, wait, there's an opportunity to actually change the narrative of retail. There's an opportunity to
Mhm.
give brands the margin. Who's going to do it if we don't do it? And that was the moment I was like, okay, this is my mission and this is my passion. And everything I've done in the past has kind of brought me to this moment.
My favorite part about our conversation before we got on this podcast and everything that you've done is that it's so mission driven.
Yeah.
And you hear a lot, and I had a conversation earlier about entrepreneurs are always solving a problem. It's something that they've had issues with in their past. But I think for you, not only are you solving a problem, but I feel like it's so driven by helping others and serving something bigger than yourself, which I feel is so unique. You did what I think a lot of people don't do, or they get stuck. What advice would you give for someone that has an idea or something circling in their head that's mission driven, that's passion driven, but they don't know what to do next, or they fear taking that next step?
Conversation. I think as soon as you have an idea, I think there's a misconception, and I think it's easier, right, when you're mission driven, right? You don't have your end goal isn't the margin or what you're making. But being able to have a conversation and talk to multiple people in multiple fields who've done similar things, totally different things, who've been leaders, and say, hey, I think this is going to make a difference. But you tell me, is this really where the help needs to be? Like, is this meaningful if I put my time into this? And I think it's really important to have those conversations with people, because you might think an idea is going to change the narrative. You might think an idea is going to help a community. But then if you talk to the community might say, thank you so much for being willing to help, but this is actually where we need help, not here.
Yeah.
And being able to listen, take feedback, and then pivot your concept, not your ethos, right? But your concept based on what's actually needed. And I think that's what we did with her story is, a subscription box worked at that time, at that moment, but that's not what the brands needed. And subscription models, you can't provide the margin you want to the brand, which is the overall issue. And so it turned into a marketplace where it's all about the brand, right? And the brand owning that margin and owning their way of storytelling and sharing their impact. But I would have never known that if I hadn't listened and talked to so many other founders who said, this is where we need help. This is where we're struggling.
I think the challenge there usually comes from ego, if we're going to be honest. Of, I have this idea, and you're connected on a soul level to this one idea. And then when someone kind of says, maybe let's lean more to the left or more to the right, it's like we're so focused on A that we can't even see what's around us. How did you wrap your head around the idea of pivoting for the future of your business when maybe you were stuck more on this option A?
So I think I was very lucky because I wasn't planning on building a business, because her story wasn't my original concept or idea of what it was. It was really easy to pivot because we never knew it was going to be what it is today. And so it allows you to not have an ego, because you're kind of just throwing spaghetti on the wall, right? And you're like, tell me what I can do to help. Tell me where I can, make a bigger difference. And why am I putting my time into this if it's not making a difference for you? Because I'm not getting anything out of it, right? So I want to make sure you're getting something out of it. And I think going back to, Payer and a company that I strategically was like, this is where we need to go and this is where we're going. And as soon as obviously COVID happened, and then all of a sudden we had to pivot to virtual experiences, that fire, stopped igniting in my belly. And I think that happens to a lot of founders is you have this idea and you're like, this is what it's going to be. And I'm not going to stop until I get there and cross the finish line. Right. And it's like me. This is who I am. This is my company. This is really how I identify myself is through my company. It's very scary. Like if you really think about it, if that's the way you feel about yourself and your company is giving you your identity, how are you ever going to pivot or change? Because you feel like you're changing yourself. But I think if you're able to take a step back and you really do have, a mission and a purpose, and it's beyond you, whether it's about your customer, whether it's about the brand, whether it's about a narrative that needs to be changed or, a movement. If you're able to look farther out, then you can make the decision based on other people rather than based on yourself.
You made a really good point that you're pivoting not your ethos, but the direction or the product or whatever it is you're offering. How do you know the difference between the two? I think the lines can get drawn. And I'm going to give like an example is someone gives you feedback on a product. And I had a guess that was like, don't listen to the 1%, cater to the 99%. But I think it's easy for founders to hear feedback of like, this is really working. We love this. and then change their whole mission and everything around that. And then it's like, okay, now you're kind of going off track. And maybe that's where the fire dies. It's because you're like, okay, now you're changing everything. So how did you stay on track with the fire inside of you and with your mission and not go too far left or right?
I think it's really important for every founder to have a North Star.
Ooh, love this.
And a why. And for me, my North Star was always, how can I create more employment for women around the world? And what that meant is create more employment for artisans around the world. And the answer for me has been, if you support small businesses and small brands, they employ the artisans who then can take care of their children, who can go to school. And, it's all a trickle down effect, right? But that's my North Star. And so every day when I wake up in the morning, am I doing what my North Star is, right? And I think the same thing for your why, your meaning. What is my why? My why is, I know that I want to bring women together. What that means, how I do it, it doesn't matter as long as I'm bringing women together. And so if I wake up in the morning and I ask myself, is what I'm doing today, reaching my why? And it's not, why am I spending time on it if there's no meaning there? And I think a lot of people go down, a 5-year journey, whether it's building a business, whether it's in a relationship, and you look back and you're like, oh my gosh,
what was I doing?
What was I doing? There was no meaning behind anything I was doing. And so if you can wake up every morning and say, what's my North Star and what's my why? And you can say, oh my gosh, I am achieving that today. Then you can check the box and say, okay, I'm moving in the right direction. It's worth it. Even though this happened or that happened, it's worth it because I'm doing my why. I'm reaching my North Star.
How did you find or come up with your North Star?
I think for me, I was able to see what model was created. And I keep going back to Acola, the company my sister Brittany started, because it was really the first social impact brand to ever make, headline news, be in Neiman Marcus, make a difference, and create sustainable change. And I think there is a lot of misconception on impact models, right? Giving back, cause marketing. We use these trend words all the time. Like, what does it mean? And my answer when people ask me about it, right, is I'm glad all of these companies are doing good, whether it's on purpose or not. They're giving back, and that's great. And that's, all you can ask for. But is it sustainable change? No, a lot of it's not. Yeah. And with Acola, what they were able to build was an opportunity of understanding, if we take care of the woman and we give her work, so we give her opportunity to work, we give her vocational training, she will then not only take care of her own kids, but she'll take care of her friends' kids when they get sick. She'll make sure she's paying the school fees. So then her sons and daughters, right, can learn how to build the next generation, and the men can become, quality leaders, right, and not leave their families. And the women can learn, I can work and take care of my family too, and I can be a powerful person within my community. But it all starts with the woman, right?
Yeah.
And so I think for me, my North Star was really created based off of that sustainability model that Brittany was able to learn over 20 years. And it took 20 years, right, of what worked. And so when I look back at, why do I do what I do? It's because the more women you can empower to have job opportunity, the more people who are going to be impacted by the masses.
Was there a story? I know you had the opportunity of going over to Africa often, and especially Uganda. Was there a particular moment in your journey that lit the fire inside of you that this is what I wanted to do and this is who I want to give back to?
Yes, Brittany tells this story so beautifully. But I was 14, so she was 24 at the time, and it was my first time going to Uganda. And I went by myself, so I flew through Amsterdam. I get to Entebbe, the airport in Uganda, and my sister picks me up, and it's nighttime. It's about 7 p.m. And we stop at a hotel. We stay there overnight. I'm very suspicious. I'm I don't feel comfortable. I feel fully out of my comfort zone. I don't really know where I am. I'm scared, will someone break through the door? You're sleeping on these cots with, mosquito nets. And I never found myself as someone who felt uncomfortable. I loved adventure. And there was some kind of feeling of like, I don't belong, or, I feel not safe, or, all of those feelings when you're just in such a new environment.
So unfamiliar.
Yeah. And we arrived the next morning in Uganda, in Jinja, and the women come out, and I had no idea what to expect, right? I knew these women are beautiful and hard workers, and I was so excited to meet them. But like, what did that mean? I don't speak the same language as them.
Mm-hmm.
What am I really giving to them that's meaningful at 14? And they come in and they're dancing and singing, and they grab my hands and they wrap this cloth around my waist, and they start teaching me how to dance the way they dance, right?
Yeah.
And it was something so beautiful, and tears just started streaming down my face, like
have chills.
uncontrollable tears. And it's not even like the joy or the magnitude of love I felt, but it was the acceptance of like, these women were giving me everything they had, like their light and their love. And I'm like, I don't deserve this. Like, why are you giving what can I give you? And it was the learning experience of like, it's relationships. Like,
Yeah.
it's not building someone a home. It's not painting something. It's not giving someone money or a handout or even a job. It's creating a relationship with them. And I talked with Brittany later that night, like tears streaming down my face. And I was like, I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense. Like, they don't have any of the material things we have. Like, none of it. Like, they don't have TVs or shoes, or, they can't get their hair done. Like, all of these like random things. I'm rambling at 14. And I'm like, and they have more joy and love and gave
Mm-hmm.
more to me today than anyone's ever given me in my lifetime. And she was like, yeah, they have spirit, and they're willing, to love and to give. And she was like, that's the misconception. You go across the sea living in the US and you're like, I'm going to volunteer and I'm giving this and I'm making a difference. And people tell me all the time with her story, wow, you're doing so much good. And I'm like, oh my gosh, no, I'm getting so much good. Like, I'm being truly like poured into, and all I can do is create a platform and a microphone for other women to share their amazing stories and what they're doing. But that was that moment. I was like, oh my gosh, we all have it so wrong.
And the most admirable thing about you is that you've carried that feeling into your business, and you can tell through the way that you're talking and through the way that you're articulating, which I think is so incredible in a sense, because people could take that opportunity in a bunch of different ways. And the perspective that you had led you to where you are today, shifting your mindset to that opportunity, into the joy, into the feelings, and really tuning in, where I've talked a lot about this on this podcast. How have you continued that sense of joy and fulfillment throughout your life from the time you're 14 to 28? I'm sure there's been a roadblock or two along the way.
Yeah, I think, my parents were going through a divorce at the time when I went to Uganda. And that's something, it was a, long-standing divorce, and that was definitely a difficult time. And I think the reason I didn't struggle, I think the way that a lot of people thought I would, being the youngest and the only one still at home, was because I had this light, and I was given it, by the women in Uganda and by traveling. I think for me, seeing other cultures and other countries and creating a relationship with people around the world through our differences, but also through our similarities, is something that always created, a spark inside me. And so finding that throughout my travels, throughout school, throughout studying, really kept, that light continuing to kind of be in front of me, and that North Star, whatever that meant. And then I think as I went to college, you can get really distracted in the little things. And it's so fun, and everyone should have a great time in college. But
Chelsea's Corner.
Chelsea's Corner. But I think with that, because I was the youngest, I was really lucky that my siblings would always bring me back to earth. And that was really important, because I think the times that I would get lost and I would forget my purpose and my meaning and my why, I would have my sister Brittany or my sister Lindsay or my dad saying, Tinsley, don't forget, like these are the things you're passionate about, and these are the things you love. And honestly, my professors too at SMU were incredible in the communications and marketing major at SMU, but I had accountability. And so whether that's a mentor, right, a sibling, a parent, a professor, I think always having the people behind you who, when you do go off track, right, and you're on this roller coaster, putting you back in your place.
Having a fire inside of you, I feel that everyone has it. I can't generalize for an entire population, but there's a lot of people who feel that inside of them, and their logic or the outside world talks them out of it because maybe it's not what they think they should be doing, or it's not what everyone else around you is doing.
Yeah.
What advice would you give for that person that feels some sort of passion or fire within them on pursuing that and letting go of fear stopping them from going after it?
I think there's this idea of comfort and this idea of our track. I think people use the word, are you on track all the time, right? And I think, we're told as a society, this is, as a woman, for example, this is what you need to do. You need to go to college, you need to graduate with a good degree, you need to get a job, find a man or woman, right, who you fall in love with, and that's your partner, and you either have and start a family, or you work and do business, and it's one or the other, and these are the choices that you have. And I think when we're checking ourselves, whether it's every year, every month, every day, am I on track? That's the status quo we kind of stick to, right?
Mhm.
And so I think people who have this fire in their belly, they feel like they have to sacrifice in order to achieve whatever their mission is. And I think there's a huge misconception on, either I'm Mother Teresa over here, or, I have a family and I have a good time and I have a social life, and there's no in between. And I think people really do have a hard time, choosing one or the other. And my, advice to them is, no, you can never balance it all. People will be like, I can balance it. I'm the CEO of a company and I'm married and I have kids and I have this. You can do it all, and you're told that and you're like, I can't do it all.
Yeah.
There's no way I can do that. And the answer is, no, you can't do it all right all the time, but you can have it all, and you can choose to, make decisions that are right for yourself. And yes, sometimes when I'm a really good businesswoman, I'm not a great wife. Right. And sometimes when I'm a really great wife, I'm not the best businesswoman, but it's choosing to make priority shifts based on what matters to you at that time because of that fire in your belly. And so, yeah, my biggest advice to people is follow it, follow your passion, and don't check if you're on track. No one is on track. And the people who are sometimes are the saddest, most miserable people because they let go of all of these, dreams and aspirations they had because they thought, this is what I have to do to be happy. And then they sit down with themselves or they go to their therapist and they're like, why am I still not happy? I did everything everyone told me to do. What did I do wrong? And the answer is they didn't listen to the fire in their belly. They didn't check on their why or their North Star.
Turning inward has been the biggest thing that I've done for myself and my self-development and really understanding what's important to me. How do you stay grounded, navigating both being newly married and running a business? You kind of mentioned you lean sometimes more towards the other. Are there certain tactical things that you do to bring yourself back to center?
Yeah, so I am a big person of prayer. It's internal prayer for me. But that's definitely something everyone has their meditation, their yoga.
Yeah.
I wish I could say I did all of it. That would be the goal. But like we said, priority shifting. I haven't
Honesty is all we
haven't
need.
been able to sit out on my porch and meditate as much as I would love to. But that's something that's really important to me in my spirit. And then really being able to have, in-depth conversations with my mentors and people who mean a lot to me, whether it's family, friends, people in the space, other women who are dealing with things that I am. But I think being able to be honest about where you're at is so important because I actually was in California at the Vista Summit, and the founder of Dry Bar was speaking, and she was talking about.
I just talked about her earlier.
Really?
So weird. Allie, yes.
Yes, Allie's amazing. She, oh my gosh, such a good speaker. And her new husband was there, and he's a coach. And so he was kind of talking through this idea of imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And it just like, it was so funny because it rang such a bell for me. And I know all of the other, entrepreneurs who are in the room at the time, but there is this feeling when you're building a company and when you're, so focused on being able to, be in quotes successful, whatever that means, whether it's success and impact, whether it's success monetarily, whether it's success in your relationship or how you carry yourself or what other people view you as. There's an imposter syndrome. And when you're really successful, I think you feel that a lot. When you're not successful, you also feel that all the time. And I appreciated that because I do think we all go through this idea of like, am I pretending to be someone I'm not? Like, how am I here? How am I in the room with such incredible women and people? And there's a question you have within yourself all the time that's like, wait, I don't get it. Like, why am I a part of this? Do I belong here? And I think the answer is like, we all have to have imposter syndrome to bring ourselves back to earth and realize,
Ooh.
we really do have to have that feeling to understand like, none of us deserve to be here, but we're
Mm-hmm.
here for a reason and we have a purpose. And so I really appreciated listening to that because a lot of times we all talk about the things we do or how we're driven or who we compare ourselves to or who we worked for. But in the end, it's understanding like we're all imposters, right? And in this world. But as long as we're doing what's meaningful to us, it doesn't matter. It just gives you that backbone and that strength to keep going.
It could be at the summit, but what's one of the best pieces of advice that you've gotten from another entrepreneur that has really impacted your journey and your story today?
Definitely always find meaning and purpose in your work and be willing to shift your priorities. And
Elaborate.
I think for me, I've been able to be surrounded with a lot of women entrepreneurs who are also mompreneurs, right? So they have kids, they've kind of grown their business from, where I was even at, 26 to now they have 3 children and they have their business and it's growing, leagues ahead. And they're able to really share what it means to prioritize what you're doing. And a lot of that has to do with what's most meaningful to you. So, family in this season is the most important, right? Like I said earlier, when I'm a really good wife, I'm not the best businesswoman, right?
Yeah.
And when I'm a really good businesswoman, like I'm not always the best wife, or I'm not taking care of myself, or working out, or doing prayer, the things that obviously make me happy. And so I think being able to hear from other women and their advice of being able to shift your priorities, meaning living in seasons like we talked about, just because this season is really hard and I have to be really focused on the business right now so we can get to the next part in January, right? And be able to bring on more of these brands. I need to know that in January, I can shift seasons and then I can spend more time with family, right? And I can push over some of those needs to my team to be able to get done and be able to let go of some of those reins. And I think a lot of us, we have a lot of trouble letting go of all the reins, right? And if you hold
Mm-hmm.
all of them, you're holding the reins of your relationship and you're holding the reins of your business and you're holding the reins of your family and your health and all of these things like so tightly, at some point, the horse is going to buck you off, right? Like you can't hold that tightly. Um, and I think that's really hard for us to like loosen up the reins on certain parts of our life in different seasons. And that's the best advice I've been given because it's so true. You really do have to let certain things go or not be the best at one thing or the other because you can't balance it all. And every season has meaning and purpose.
How do you let go yourself?
Let go of
Like, how did you learn to let go of control? I
the
think
reins.
yeah, it's common. It's
By holding on to the reins and getting bucked off. That's how I learned to let go.
she got totally kicked
I got
off.
fully kicked off the horse a couple of times, and I was like, okay, I can get back on. And this
Yeah.
time, I'm going to give it a little more slack. No, it definitely took failing and falling and breaking down. Something a lot of founders, especially women entrepreneurs I've talked to, deal with exhaustion. And this isn't like, oh, I'm so tired this morning. Like, I don't want to wake up. No, like physical exhaustion. Like, we'll
Yeah.
go to the hospital, have to get an IV because they weren't getting enough sleep. They start having like fainting episodes. They
Oh,
don't feel good.
no.
And no one really talks about this. I've had this conversation with like 8 other female founders in Texas who've dealt with this. And I don't think people like to talk about it.
That's so sad.
But it's your body is not built to do everything. So when you
Yeah.
hold on to all of the reins like that, of course, like if everything else doesn't give out on you, meaning, right, you don't give out on your relationship, you don't give out on work certain times, different things, your health is.
Yeah.
Your body's gonna be like, I can't do that. Like, I actually can't do this. And so I think it took having that crisis myself to be like, oh my gosh, I've got to take care of my body and all of the other things, but know that there are certain times to do more. And so that was definitely, a wake up call for me, is one of those times where I got exhausted and it was scary. Like, I literally just passed out on the floor and there was no reason for it, like anything like that. And I went to the doctor and they took blood and everything. And they're like, no, you're totally fine, but your iron levels are so low because, like, are you getting sleep? Are you taking care of yourself? I'm like, oh, I forgot about myself. That's a good point. I should probably get some sleep.
Prescription is
yeah.
not.
But I think being able to take care of yourself too is so important, because if not, you are going to fall off the horse and something's got to give,
I love what you've talked about in seasons and leaning into what that season of life is giving to you, which requires you to be present and to understand that. What advice would you give to people on leaning into that and not trying to change or control the season that they're in of life?
It's really hard, right? Because we all want to be in control of our own fate and our own life and our own season. But when you are present in it, like when you can just take on a season and go, okay, this is going to be a tough one. We're going to have to get through this and this, but enjoying the silver lining, within it, and really taking it on head first and saying, when I start this season, this is where I was. And when I ended it, look at how far we've come.
Yeah.
Look at all of the things we did. And I always tell people, it's said a lot, but it really is about the journey. The journey is the part that we learn the most from. It's where we gain all of our relationships and our network and our communities, that's where we build them. And so I think for people who really want to control their seasons, they miss out on experiencing them. And if you don't experience it, then you can't reflect and say, wow, these are the things that I was able to learn about myself or learn about these other people who really blessed me during that time. So I think the more present you can be, the more you can really build relationships within those seasons.
Enjoying the process is something that I'm often told when I'm leaning more into impatience or I am wanting something so badly. And that's something that I talk to myself a lot about, is just, hey, be present here and now. This is all you have, and it's all part of the process. And you said something along the journey, which I think is super important. That's dive into every opportunity and don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Why is that so important for someone that's wanting to pursue entrepreneurship?
If you only dipped your toe in, you probably wouldn't jump in.
True. Facts.
So that's the first step. You have to dive in, because if you put your toe in that cold water, you might not choose
too cold. Other way.
Moving this way. No, but I think diving in is so important, because it's not until you're fully immersed within what you're doing that you can really understand where things need to be done, where things need to be changed, how narratives or opportunities can be, changed and twisted. And so if you dive into every opportunity, then you're able to see all of the different things that are in front of you. And the more you get your hands dirty and the more you do the work, I always tell all of the different employees that we bring on in the beginning, I want you to do every part of your role to start, even the tiny tedious things. And then you can bring on an intern, right, who can help you with this. And then they can bring on someone else who can help you so you can get more done. But I need you to get your hands dirty first so you can understand where the best efficient process is and how it can be done. And I think a lot of times we look at founders 5, 10, 20 years down the line, and we're about to start a business, right? And you look and you're like, oh my gosh, she doesn't go to any of those pop-ups. Like, she doesn't move the boxes. Why would I move the boxes? I'm going to hire someone to move the boxes for me, right? Or I'm going to hire someone to go to this event for me, or to do the tagging for my e-commerce website. And what you realize is every single successful founder did the dirty work in the beginning, because it took them doing the dirty work to understand efficiently what needed to be done to create a successful business. And I think because entrepreneurs and founders are romanticized now, I think there's a lot of amazing like Apple shows about, WeWork and Uber and, all of these like big, businesses. And you think of these founders as like extraterrestrial, and the real thing is they were the valet guy at one point, or they were the one who was pulling the boxes out of the car, blood, sweat, and tears. But I think a lot of people want to skip a lot of steps and then have a successful company. And if you're even able to skip all those steps or seasons, right, then you get there and everything falls apart because you had no chance to create a foundation that was steady and strong. And so it takes getting your hands dirty to really know this is the efficient process I need to create, so then we can continue to grow and build.
The most inspiring thing for me with talking with entrepreneurs, that every journey is different, but the journey is what people connect to. It's what people resonate with. And it's the struggles and the obstacles that each and every person has had to overcome that have inspired me to get there, because you hit the nail on the head. We glamorize. And even for me, sometimes it's like, well, why do you want to do this? Is it for the title, or because you think it's cool? When in reality, there's so much tedious work. And I had this conversation earlier, like 30% of it is what you see, even with this podcast. Like you see an outcome, but what went into all of that? There's a million things, and people don't see that. And that's what I hope people get away from these episodes, is like the challenges that each person goes through, and the struggles and the sacrifices and the compromise, because that's what you emotionally connect to. It's the emotion in those struggles that people can connect to and resonate with. And that's what gets you to the other side. Like that's what's kept me going, is every story that's like, I was at this place and I wanted to quit, and then I did this, and everything after that, not everything, but it turned
changed.
a corner.
Yeah,
exactly. And it's like, that's really the story that people connect to the most.
Well, and I think listening to the call, whatever that call is for you, if you can listen to it and you can hear it. And like you said, like when that fire is in your belly, and the first step, talk about it. Like talk about that fire, like talk to other people and get there. And then I also think, there's a misconception on, I have to build it either on my own or I have to start this company. Right? Which I think a lot of people feel. They're like, I want to be an entrepreneur and I want to work for myself, so I need to start the company. And I think a lot of people miss out on the fact that there could be thousands of startups, right, that have 1 or 2 employees that are doing something either really similar to you or need to be changing into what maybe an idea you have. And so merging with other founders is also something that really isn't talked about, that is so needed, because we have so many entrepreneurs, in the US and around the world, and we need supporters too. Like we need operational managers, we need CMOs, COOs, CROs, creative directors. And so something I also urge people to do before starting a business, like when you're having these conversations, which is why I always say that's the first step, is anyone else doing something similar to you that's trying to make an impact, right? Or trying to create a solution that you want to create. And have you ever tried to talk to them? Because that's something that I think really needs to be done. And what I've learned with her story is collaboration is truly the most successful formula. We are always stronger together. We are always stronger with multiple creative minds. And so if you can find someone who's building something or has an idea too, and they might be a couple steps ahead of you, like talk with them and see, is this something we can do together and make a bigger impact because of it? And what I've seen with her story is collaboration is not only, today, but collaboration's our future. And the more you see these capsule collections, right, in fashion, the more you see women coming together and starting their own initiatives, right? brand X brand. It's going to be so much more than that as we continue to kind of grow in this movement of, we are better together. We're bigger together. We make a bigger impact together. So I challenge people to really think about that too, because when we go back to ego in the beginning, right? You don't have to be the one to start your business. With her story, I was not the one who started my business. Like Brittany, Whitney, and I came together, and it was really Brittany and Whitney who were on a FaceTime call with Laith, my nephew, and Stella, her daughter, and they're talking about, oh my God, look at what's happening with Miracle Milk right now. I'm so scared. Like in the pandemic, are people still going to, order these lactation cookies? And is my company going to go underwater? And Brittany's talking about a cola. She gives me a call and she's like, Whitney and I were having this conversation and we're really worried about, women entrepreneurs. I know you're dealing with this with Pear right now. Would you want to kind of come and like execute this and help us make it happen? I would have never thought about support her story or doing that. You know what I mean? I want to help and I want to work with women, but it took my sister giving me that call to say, hey, here's an opportunity to make a difference. You want to come in on this? And now I'm the one running it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you have to also be able to separate your ego and say, I might be the person to come in and make that difference, but I might not be making the original, idea or concept. And again, being able to pivot and change and really grow from that.
Not coming in with the initial idea, but being brought in and then now running it. What's the biggest thing that you've learned throughout that entire process, the shift from kind of being a third party to being in charge?
Being able to have an opinion. Really being able to come in and say, listen first, always listen first. You will learn so much and you will always have better feedback for that. But I've always been the person, whether it was through writing essays and editing, right? Or helping friends through relationship advice, like all of these things. I am much better at someone coming to me and saying, hey, here's my thought, or here's my essay, or here's my pitch. And then I look at it and I can say, this is how we can optimize this pitch. This is how we can change this and make it better, more efficient, more catchy, whatever that is. And that's one of my strengths, right? Yeah. And I come up with ideas all the time, but those ideas might flop, right? Yeah. They might not actually stick to the wall. But I think I'm really good at keeping things sticky. And so understanding, I think that was my strength.
Yeah.
That was a great learning experience for me, and saying, okay, I can take something and then I can optimize it, change it, and really turn it into something that can make a much bigger impact than maybe the idea originally was.
What's your number one key or secret, if you will, to optimization within your business?
Always being able to pivot, always being able to change, and really staying up to date, not only on current events, meaning the news, but when I say listen, have conversations, get coffee with people, I probably take anywhere between 15 to 20 meetings a week. And even if that's a 15-minute phone call or a 2-hour lunch, I am always meeting with people who are smarter than I am. And I'm always aware that they're smarter than I am, right? Yeah. And that's something that's really important, because you can't come up with all of the solutions. I mean, I'm sure if we called Elon Musk, he would say a lot of the ideas I've had, right, maybe weren't all my own, know? Yeah. And a lot of people who were behind him who changed, or maybe he wouldn't, who knows? But those are,
we don't want to find out.
We don't want to find out. But those are kind of the things that I feel like allowed me to grow in my journey and help her story grow, is by listening, and then being able to take feedback or ideas or what's even going on in other people's industries to say, ooh, we should be doing something like that, or we should be working with them, or we should be collaborating with them, or, how did they do something that, was really difficult or flopped or failed. Listening to people's failures is always so important too. Being the youngest, I learned that really quickly, because I was like, okay, I'm not sneaking out at 1. I'm sneaking out at 2, because that's when my dad won't know. But like that, like, hey, literally,
that is me.
but it's learning from other people's mistakes, so you don't have to make them. And that saved us so much money. Like we would have never been able to get her story to where it is today without learning from so many other people's,
Mhm.
trial and error. So we didn't have to spend that money learning it.
Yeah. I just wrote down something. Your take on collaboration overall as a whole reminds me of the rising tide lifts all boats.
Hmm.
How do you keep that mentality and not look at collaboration and what other people are doing as a threat?
I think I get to be in a very fun space where, my goal is being a social business. And I think, it is hard for some businesses to get behind that concept because they always have to think about their investors and their
Mhm.
bottom line. And, a place that we get to be at is I get to be the boss right now
Yeah.
and where we're at,
Yeah.
right? And I get to make those decisions and say, I want to focus on the brands, and the brands are the most important, and the brands are going to get the margin. And therefore, I want us to all to grow together. And so I think first and foremost, I get to be in a really special place where by having a social business, it gets to be on the forefront of your mind and you really get to make those, decisions consciously. But on top of that, I'm definitely an analytics nerd. I love seeing like when things are successful, why are they successful? Like what were the points of this, that? And what I've been able to see is we truly are not only stronger together emotionally, right? Through
Yeah.
a movement, but truly, if you look at Acola's following on Instagram and through their customers, right? And who they're reaching. And let's say it's really based around luxury impact customers in the Southeast. Let's say that's their majority. And then you talk to, Mignon Gavigan, who's also in jewelry. Maggie and Brittany are really good friends, and they're in New York, right? And again, luxury, trend jewelry. People know it's made in India. People are, they love that style, and you look at how many followers they have on Instagram and how many customers they have in their database. If you add the two up, even after taking out, right, the amount that might cross over, you're both growing together by
Mhm.
sharing each other's story and by sharing each other's um, kind of pool of customers, because they're not only buying one pair of earrings or one bracelet, and the analytics show that. And so I think a lot of people get scared. Well, I'll collaborate with her because she's in home and I'm in jewelry. So as women, yeah, we are stronger together. But I'm not collaborating with her who's in sustainable apparel and I'm in sustainable apparel because she's taking my margin, right? Or she's taking a
Yeah.
part of the pie. And the answer is, if you really look at she's not. You're actually making a larger pie
Pile.
together because more people are learning what sustainable clothing and sustainable brands, do and mean, and more people want to purchase from you the more that you open up that
Mhm.
vertical. Two people I think who've done it really well in Dallas, Mirren Crosby and City Boots, two luxury cowboy boot company, and they talk about each other, and they'll share each other's stories and they get behind each other, and we'll do events, and I think they learn a lot, but they're like, we're creating a new space that wasn't out, like
Yeah.
luxury cowgirl boots, like, and people are willing to spend thousands of dollars on cowgirl boots, right? So it's a win-win for both of them to be successful and share each other's stories because they're saying this is a new vertical and we're growing. And I think, people are starting to learn that. And I think the longer you are in the business, the more you understand what collaboration really means. But it is still, it's still a struggle sometimes. And I've had conversations with brands, and I won't say who, but on email where we'll say, okay, we're so excited to have you on Her Story, and here are, some of our social obligations. It's really important for you to share about at least 5 brands and the Her Story ecosystem to be a part of, who we are as a conglomerate, like put your money where your mouth is kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And I've had brands be like, oh, well, I have 1 million followers on Instagram, and that artisan company only has 10,000 followers on Instagram. So why would I share about them when I'm not getting as much from them as they are from me? And I'll literally say, so it sounds like you're not a fit for Her Story, because our goal is to uplift women, each other, right? And we want each other to grow. It's not about how many apples Susie has or Caroline has. And so, that's a huge important takeaway for me when we're choosing brands to come onto
Mhm.
Her Story is you need to want to uplift the underdog, right? The smaller communities, because we want to grow together. It's not who's growing quicker, who has more. And I've had so many brands after being like, oh, then I don't think you're, a good fit for the movement because this is what obviously we believe in. They're like, oh, no, that's not what I meant. I just meant like I was meaning, what am I getting? No, it's totally fine, because I think they don't realize what they're saying.
Yeah, until it's verbal.
Until it's verbal, and then you're retold it, and you're like, no, that's not what I meant. I want to support other women, but they're so used to negotiating as business women on like,
Yeah.
of course, it needs to be mutually beneficial, of course. But that doesn't mean you can't support other brands that aren't, to your caliber yet. You're stronger together because people are discovering new trends, and they're, making an impact in whether it's Africa or South America, wherever that might be. So I think we're definitely, rewriting a narrative for women where, yes, we all say woman empowerment, we all say women supporting women, but are we actually doing it? And I think her story creates that opportunity for women to say, yeah, we're actually doing it.
I always think back to that person that has 1 million followers probably got some help, or someone helped them along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime I catch myself or I hear someone else, there's always someone that helped you get to where you are. And my thing is, the least I could do is help them.
Yeah.
And even with this podcast, like, I never look at any of that type of stuff, because at the end of the day, if I can give you the opportunity for you to share your story, that is enough for me. And like, that's enough for the other person that's listening to this. And so and I think your why is so much bigger than you or the business. It's so service and mission driven that you can't even really fall into that mindset, because you're thinking and you're driven towards something that's bigger than most people think on a everyday basis.
No, for sure. And I think every woman, if you took a step back, right, if they really thought through, how did I get here, right, they wouldn't have that same mentality or answer. But I think especially we're go, go, go.
Yeah.
On to the next thing. We only have so much time. And so choosing to give back some of your time or energy or company promotion on a platform like Instagram, right? We're always, negotiating what you're getting or who's getting what, that you do have to take a step back to say, oh, right, I totally got help and assistance here. I would never be here. Right. And I think we all have that genuine desire to give back. I think just sometimes we can be blinded by, what's right in front of us. You know what I mean? Rather than looking back at the little guy and saying, wait, I want to help them grow because someone else helped me grow. And even if they didn't, right? Because there are also women who will be like, I did not get help on this. You know what I mean? Like, I had to do this all by myself. And yes, I'm sure they had some help, but like, this was me. I didn't get assistance here. Why should I, help this person? And if they took a step back, right?
Yeah.
They would say, oh, because I wish someone was there to help me, right? And uplift, because again, we're stronger together. So I think it's not that anyone doesn't have the mentality. I think it's more that people are such in a hurry. They're not present, right?
Yeah.
As you were saying earlier, that they don't have the opportunity to think through their why or their North Star or what's meaningful to them. And the moment they do, then they're like, oh my God, this is such an amazing opportunity.
What's the biggest thing that you've learned about yourself through your journey in building a business?
All of the things I don't know. I think, especially in my like early mid 20s, you kind of have this feeling, and being the youngest probably is a huge part of this too. You feel like you know a lot. Like, even though you're young, like, you feel like you've learned a lot, you've done a lot, and there's this mentality of like, I can learn it, I can do it, I can get it done. And I think the more I, have grown into her story and the other businesses I was a part of, the more I realized, oh my gosh, there's so much I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's invigorating. That's so exciting. Like, it's so fun not to know, and like have the unknowns in front of you, and be willing to kind of navigate those waters, and be willing to ask for help, obviously, when you need it. But I do think, for me, I can say out of the, 6 years, let's say, I've been doing marketing, or 8 years doing marketing, every single day I learn something
Yeah.
new. And I think with her story, I get to learn a new story. And as you said, right, the journey, you learn so much from one person's journey.
Mm.
I've gotten to learn 250 women's journeys from around the world, whether it's, Brazil, Uganda, South Africa, the Philippines. And to me, the connection between this web of stories and journeys and things, that we've all learned is we have so many similarities.
Mhm.
So many women have the same insecurities, the same, problems and solutions that they had to create. And I think sometimes we always talk about our differences, right? Like, yeah, go to Argentina and you'll see how different it is. And it is really different. And they're such different cultures. But I think what we don't celebrate is also the crazy
There it
similarities
is.
we have for literally living in a totally different place and culture with totally different backgrounds. And there are so many of those. And so I think there is something to be celebrated, not just in our differences, but also in our similarities.
Switching the perspective. It's
Yeah.
like, are you going to focus on what's different? Not that that's negative. Are you going to
Yep.
focus on what's similar and where you can connect? Because it's
Mhm.
usually where things start to come to fruition is like, what do we have in common? Whether it's business, relationships,
Yeah.
life, it's like, where can we kind of give and take? And to your point, exactly what you're doing in your business and like lift
Yeah.
each other up. It's in those similarities that things really
That you
start to
pull
brew.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And bring to life. Where do you see her story going over the next 5 years? I know it's everyone's favorite question. Where do you see your life in 5 years? No idea.
I'm sure it will never be where I expect it to
Yeah.
be.
Where would you like
That's
it to be?
been my biggest learning experience. But I think for me is I really want us to continue the movement and changing the narrative of retail. And if in, 5 years, her story can really be, not only a lifestyle brand, but an ecosystem for women, not only to have a platform and a microphone to share their story and sell their luxury products, right? But also have an opportunity for micro investment, an opportunity to collaborate not just with other brands from a collection perspective, but collaborate with other brands from a M&A perspective, to where maybe 5 brands can come together and create a coalition. And to
Yeah.
me, that's what her story really nurtures. It's not about the product, right?
Mhm.
It's about the story. And that's why we always say wearable stories, because if we can bring together a community of women who truly believe that we're stronger together and truly believe that, the brands deserve the margin and the artisans deserve fair pay, and women will, enhance their communities if they're given the opportunity to do so. If we all believe that and we continue to grow, this is going to be much more than a movement. It's really going to change the face of retail. And that's what I see in 5 years is based on the women I've worked with and the stories I've heard. I think it's not only changing from a brand and a retail perspective, it's changing from a customer perspective, because customers want to wear something that's not only, giving back and making
Mhm.
an impact, because we talk about cause marketing all the time, but it's telling a story.
Yeah.
And they're connected to that story based on what they're wearing on their body. And that's what I'm really excited about.
There's no irony that it's her story and you're changing the story of women all around the world.
Mhm.
Was that the narrative, or did that just work out like that?
So
This is an ego question for me. I'm like, did a light bulb just go off in my head?
Well, it's funny because her story has always been around. It's history from the female perspective. That's
Yeah.
truly what her story means. And so when we started Support Her Story, we actually had it called Small Biz Box
Oh.
originally. It was Small Business Box. And then we started looking at what we were doing and being like, are we going to always be subscription, or is it this? And my sister Brittany, I'll always give her credit. She was like, what about her story, like her space story. Like it's her story we're sharing. We're like, ooh, I love that. And then we looked it up because you always look at the trademarks and we're like, oh, her story is like history. It's like trying to trademark history. Like that's not going to happen. But then Support Her Story was available. And so grabbed that domain. And from there, I think we were able to transition to what supporting her story meant.
Mm.
And I think over the past, 2 years, it's really grown into what it is today. Like I wouldn't say 2 years ago, I was like, oh, her story means sharing her stories. Because yes, we were always doing that with the subscription box, but now it's about creating a microphone and a platform for her to rewrite her story. And we always say designing her story, right? She gets to be the designer of her story. She gets to be the writer of her story. But no, I wouldn't say we knew exactly what it was going to mean 2 years ago and how much weight it would carry. But the more that we grow, the more we're like, oh, wow, this
name is everything.
Cuts deep, and yeah, I think it's been really incredible to kind of see that growth and how the women behind the brands connect with each other's stories. So yeah.
I was going to let you off the hook and ask the final question, but you said something that I need you to elaborate on. You said your biggest learning experience has been that it never works out how you thought.
Yeah.
Why? And why is it so important for people to understand? I just had this conversation earlier, but I think it's very important for people to recognize that your vision is not always going to end up how you thought, but that's okay.
Well, it kind of goes back to our original conversation, right? You don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you start off on a path and you're like, this is, my end goal, you get into the journey and you realize, oh, wow, there's so much more here.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we can't control the narrative, right? Because the narrative's being written by so many of us. And so if you're creating a successful business and if you're creating something for people, it should be about the people, right? The customers, the brands, the clients, whatever that might be. And so if you came up with an idea and 5 years down the road, you end up with the exact same idea that you had 5 years ago, in my opinion, you failed because you didn't listen to the journey and you didn't listen to the customers or the clients or the brands. You only listen to the ego. You only listen to yourself. And so you might have lost out on a lot of opportunities you could have done. It doesn't mean it can't be really similar, but I don't think it ever turns out the way we planned because life has a much, larger plan for us and different factors and, data points within there that we didn't even know, like unforeseen variables, right? You didn't know we're going to come in and the world always is changing, right? We're always changing and evolutionizing. So I think that's why it never comes out the way you plan because the minute you say, this is what I'm going to do or this is not what I'm going to do, somewhere up there in the cosmos looks down on you and they're like, little did you know.
That is the story of my life. I can never say I'm never going to do something because the thing I say I'm never going to do is a thing that happens tomorrow. Oh, it's just, there's no such thing as never in my vocabulary anymore. So if you hear it on this podcast, we need to
never say never.
Yeah, exactly. The song, Never Say Never, Justin Bieber, right? Yep. He's ringing in my brain. Where can people find you? Let the audience market yourself.
Yep, on Support Her Story. So you can follow us on Instagram at Support Her Story. We're also on the web. So we have an e-commerce website, Support Her Story, with 70 of our 250 brands that you can shop. It's all luxury, customized brands between, Mignon Gavigan to small brands like Corazon Playero, made in Mexico, or brands made in Brazil. So it's a really cool way to learn about the stories of the women. And hopefully we're going to be having a lot of pop-ups coming up in 2023. Okay. So we're going to be in Highland Park on Thursday and Friday doing a Her Story Market. And then we're going to be in Fort Worth next weekend at Shops at Clear Fork with 20 of our woman-led brands from around the world. So we have founders coming in from Brazil to be a part of the market and share their story.
We need to go Thursday and Friday.
Yeah, you've got to come.
Okay, I'll be there. I'll be there. Probably leaning more toward Friday. I potentially could do Thursday, but we'll talk about it after.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll put all of that in the show notes. So everyone, is your hat from there?
Yes, this is Corazon Playero. So it's all hand embroidered by artisans in Cabo San Lucas. So I actually met Isabel, speaking of relationships, 2 years ago on the beach. And she had 2 artisans who were hand embroidering palm hats on the beach. And now they are going to be in St. Bernard's. They have about 35 artisans that they're employing and continuing to grow every day. And all of their hats sell out within like minutes of launching on the website. So it's so cool to see a brand who truly, we started with and seeing where they are, a year and a half later. That gives me all of my purpose that I need.
A heart of gold, this one. You truly have a heart of gold, which is admirable. The last question I ask every single person, which I feel like you're going to have a lot to answer on this one. But Tinsley, what are you grateful for today?
I am so grateful for not only, my family and friends who truly brought me back down to earth and have really, reminded me of, what's most important and those priorities as we've talked about. But I'm so grateful for truly the community of women who have blessed me with their stories and their journeys and really, morphed me as a person. To want to do more and continue to, we always talk about that fire in the belly and how it can dim during hard times. My fire is like radiating out of me. I feel like every day I have more purpose and more meaning and more passion because of the women I work with. So I'm so grateful for that. And then honestly, just really excited for, the future. I think we always talk about the negatives in the news and things going on, but I truly am so grateful for the opportunities we all have to collaborate and give back and learn from one another. And so, yeah, I have a million things to be grateful for, but the women in my life have really changed, the person I am today.
Opportunity, connection, relationships are all the most important thing. What
Yeah.
do we, if we don't have relationships, if we're not giving and receiving love, then what are we here to do? I love that. And I usually say what I'm grateful for. I'm going to say I'm grateful for my health, but I'm going to do an affirmation. I'm going to say I am present because that is what I'm working on. And so I'm going to switch the narrative a little bit. You're not off the hook. You're still grateful, but mine is an affirmation on being present. So thank you so much for being on. This was amazing.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me.